You are listening to the weekly Dartscast. 1 hour 90.
Hello and welcome to an episode of the weekly Dartscast. I'm Alex Moss, and joining me as always, my co-host, Darts statistician Burton DeWitt. It's been a couple of weeks. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Enjoyed the couple of weeks. Did a little traveling. Went to Boston and Plymouth, though not y'all's Boston and Plymouth, but ours, as well as New York. How have you been?
Very nice. Yeah, doing well this end too. And we've got lots to get to. We've got 3 guests to bring you. We've got the ProTour #1, Joe Cullen. We've got the PDC stage official, Gary Wood. And we've just got off the phone with the special one, the Grand Slam winner, Jose De Sousa, will be joining us as well. But first, let's look back at last week, the 4th Super Series of the year. And we'll start off with the winners. We mentioned a couple of them just then. Joe Cullen, Jose De Sousa winning 2 of them, and Peter Wright. What did you take away from their title victories in Milton Keynes last week?
Well, I'll start with the person you'll be hearing from later. Well, actually, you're gonna hear from 2 of the players later, but I'll start with the one who won 2 events. That's because I think right now he is the best player in the world. His performances this past week moved him to right now being the best player. And it is a little fluid right now because we have been talking about that because, Gerwyn Price and Johnny Clayton have every claim to it as well. But Jose just is getting better, and it's been seeming more and more likely that the time would come that he would become, at least on current form, the best player. But I think he's just going to keep getting better. And you look back not on one of the days he won, but on the first of the days of the week when he goes out and throws a 127 average, just because that's what he can do. Okay, he lost the next match. He did regress a bit. You're going to regress from a 127. But what does he do the following day? He wins the title. What does he do the day after that? He wins the title. That's just what he does. He's playing at that type of level and having that level of confidence that we saw from Michael van Gerwen a few years ago. He's not as consistently averaging 105 plus as Van Gerwen was when he was at his best. But he's getting closer to that. His poor games are becoming fewer, and they're becoming better. He's still averaging into the 90s even when he's off his game. And I said before, well, I guess I say last week, but I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, that I thought he'd win a couple titles. This was a chance for him to really put down the pedal and show what he can do. And he did that. He did even more than I thought he would do, even though he did win the 2 titles like I kind of tipped him to do. But boy, he is one hell of a player and only getting better. As far as Joe Cullen, he's the ProTour #1, and he's picking off these titles. He needs to do it on TV. We've been saying that for a long time, but I do think he's closer than he's ever been, because even when he was, getting to the World Match Play semifinals a few years ago, he wasn't as consistently playing at the level that he needed to be able to contend in one of these titles. He's never really had much of a B game. That's changing now. It might not be as good as it needs for him to be a top 10 player or a top 5 player right now, but he is developing a B game. The one thing he was missing is now showing up, and that's making difference. That's why he's the ProTour #1. You can't be the ProTour #1 if you don't have a B game. Joe Cullen now has one. And Peter Wright, it's been a poor year for him. He's been injured, but he looks like he's getting back to health, and he needed a title. He absolutely needed a title. Granted, so does Van Gerwen right now. Peter Wright got that title. Now he's in to show in the next week or next couple of weeks with the next Super Series that he still is in that conversation as the best player in the world. He hasn't been in the conversation so far this year because of his injuries and because of his poor form. Well, now he has that, hopefully, the confidence that he needs to show that it's not just the 3 people I mentioned at the start of this question. It's still wide open as who's the best player, and he still has world championship money on his ranking. So, you know what? He has every right to say, I'm still there.
Some good points, and I'll go in chronological order, if you like, and I'll start at the beginning with Joe Cullen, who won the first title of the week. And going into this Super Series, the last one that we've had, there was a lot of talk about it being the return of Gerwyn Price, who missed the Premier League, missed the last Super Series after that positive COVID test. I think it was 86 days between his last appearance and this Super Series. It was the same with Joe Cullen as well. You're going to hear from him a bit later about why he didn't go to Germany, but he's been missing for a long time, and he comes back and sent out a statement. He wins that first title, and he agrees that he is starting to win games when he's not performing at his best, and that is the sign of a top player. If you're not performing at your best and you're able to grind out results, it can only be a good thing. And we saw that in the way that he won the title on Monday last week. He through some good averages before then, a 105 against Ian White, a 99 against Martin Atkins. But the final 3 games, quarterfinals, semi-finals and the final, all against top players, James Wade, Michael Van Gerwen, Gerwyn Price in the final, 93 average for all 3 games. And if you'd have said Joe Cullen would do that and win all 3 of those games maybe a couple of years ago, I don't think you'd have called it. But I think we're seeing now the timing is there with Joe Cullen more than it was before. He had some big finishes in those games. I think it was a 1-2-5 in the final, a 1-16 in the semi-final against Van Gerwen, and he's able to pull out some big legs on throw against throw when he needs them. And you touched on it there, that it is now a case of, can he produce this on TV, go and win a TV title or get to a final and cement himself in the top 10, top 8, maybe be in the Premier League next year, because we know that his stock has risen from that game that he had with Van Gerwen at the World Championship. It's now, can he build on that for the rest of the year? And he's put himself in a good position the way he's performed this year. Jose, what more can we say? That 127 average was ridiculous, and I think it is the highest we've seen, in at least in the Dark Connect era of the PDC. I know there's a few stories going around when players have averaged 130 plus, but as far as the figures on a screen, that's the highest I think we've seen. And to win back-to-back titles takes some doing, especially in the current standard of players at the moment. But yeah, he's right up there, and still this is his 3rd year on the tour. He's still very new to the PDC, and he's won big titles, the Grand Slam, he's won the European Tour titles, he's got to the Premier League final, but he still loves turning up to these Pro Tour events and putting on big performances, putting in big averages, and he's done that last week again. And finally, with Peter Wright, I think I'm going to call him the Terminator, because he just keeps coming back. When you start to write him off, he puts in a couple of bad performances. Even last week, he had an 89 average first round, lost. Second day, lost with an 86 average in the second round. Scraped through a couple of games on the 3rd day to get to the quarterfinal, and even on the run to the title on the final day, scraped through the first couple of rounds, but a 170 finish in the decider against Ryan Joyce. And then he really did turn it on in those final 3 games, 103, 106, 108 average to win the title. Consistency-wise, he's probably not where he was a few years ago. Is that to do with the change of darts all the time? I'm not quite so sure. Perhaps it is, perhaps it's not. But we are seeing that he is now more susceptible to throwing in a high 80s, low 90s average. But he is also capable of throwing in those big averages, the 106s, the 108s in semi-finals, in finals, to win the title. I don't think he's the second best player in the world right now. That's where his ranking is. But there's no doubt he is still one of the best in the world.
Now, we did see as well some promising signs for former world champions Rob Cross, Adrian Lewis, Steve Beaton last week. What do you think they can take away from Super Series 4?
Well, let's start with Adrian Lewis. And I know it was very early days in the season, but going into this Super Series, he wasn't in a spot for the World Championship, which surprised a lot of people. And we know he did miss the 3rd Super Series in Germany. He was one of many players not to travel to that one that were based in the UK. But he wasn't in a Pro Tour spot. He wasn't in a seeded spot, and he wasn't in any of the TV events for the rest of the year, which was for someone who's done so much in the game was a big surprise. But it was good signs for him. I think last week he had a 110 average in one of the games. He won his board for the first time this year. He made a couple of quarterfinals, a last 16. We put out a question of the week this week, which was, will Raymond van Barneveld and Adrian Lewis qualify for the World Match Play this year? 44% are going with Adrian Lewis to do it. So people are starting to maybe back him more now than they did in recent months. I think consistency-wise, I just spoke about it with Peter Wright, but with Adrian, you are seeing those big switches between a 110 average, next game 92, a 89 average, then up to 102. I think another time it was 108 to 88. So there's some big swings in the averages, and when we're seeing the tour as it is now, a lot more players can throw those high 90 averages, ton averages. You are going to get caught out, and that's what we saw with Adrian Lewis. He's £6,000 off the World Match Play with 4 events to go. That's a final in one of these 4 events coming up, and then hope that the other players don't do as well. So he's in the mix. He has put himself in the mix, but there's still a lot of work to do. Rob Cross, again, it was good to see him playing well again, a semi-final and a quarter-final. And the semi-final, there's not much you can do when Jose De Sousa is averaging 112, but you take out those last couple of days when he made those big runs, 11 games, his lowest average was 96. So that's a good run of games there for Rob Cross. And one of those games, he beat Michael Van Gerwen. That's the first time that he's beaten him since the final of the Brisbane World Series 2018, a long time ago. I think it was 9 games he'd gone losing against him. So that's a good rut to put an end to. And he has been relegated from the Premier League the last couple of years, which, okay, it's not going to affect your ranking, but it is going to affect your confidence. And it's a big 6 months coming up for him, as we know, with the World Match Play defence on the Order of Merit, at least not defending the title this year, but he's got that to defend coming up. The European Championship, we don't even know if he's going to be in the European Tour events this year. He's currently 17th on that Pro Tour list, so he needs someone to drop out in that top 16 to be a seed. Otherwise, he's going to have to go to the qualifiers. But yeah, I think there was good signs for him. And lastly, Steve Beaton, last 16 he had, quarterfinal he had. It could have been better. Even saying that, he was 5-3 up in the quarterfinals against Luke Humphries and ended up losing that 1-6-5. But it would be good to see him go on a big run in this final Super Series. I know you touched on it when we last spoke, that he's been in these similar positions where he looks like he's going to miss out on Blackpool or the World Match Play, and then he pulls out a big run. And we've seen he has got the capabilities to do it. He can produce some big averages, and we spoke to him before the World Championship last year and he said that he will never go to Q School, so we do want to see him for a few more years. So hopefully we'll see more weeks like we did last week and he can stay on the tour for a little bit longer.
Yes, and I'll start where you started with Adrian Lewis. And okay, you bring up a good point. The consistency is not there, and that is a sign of a player who has some confidence issues when you're really fluctuating between 110s and 85s. But it does show that there has been an improvement in his game, that he's getting those 110s, because he wasn't last year. He wasn't earlier this year. He didn't have a higher average than a 104 and change in the last couple of years until this past Super Series. And it's not just that. Over the 4 days at Super Series 4, Adrian Lewis had 600 plus averages. He had only had 7 in the entire Pro Tour season last year. Through the 20 events that he played, he did miss 3 of the events, but in the 20 he played, he had a total of 7 ton plus averages. He had 6 in 4 days. So for Adrian Lewis, he's being able to bring his A game, I was about to say more often than he has in the last couple of years since he struggled, but that would be an overstatement. He's been able to bring his A game full stop, because he wasn't able to do that last year. He wasn't able to do that the year before, and that's why he's been slipping down the rankings. We've seen some good performances from him on TV. We've seen him make some runs, but you need to get into those events in order to make those runs and to defend those prize money. As it was going, he wasn't doing that, but he played some really good stuff, and he played some very timely stuff, because even with some of those mid-80s averages, he was able to get the win. So for Adrian Lewis, it is a huge step in the right direction as New Zealand win the 2021 ICC World Test Championship Final. As of when we're recording, they just hit the 6 to win it. So breaking news that you already know by the time you're listening. But for Adrian Lewis, well, I guess that bounced. It was only a 4, my bad. But for Adrian Lewis, really positive signs, and there hasn't been much of that recently. For Rob Cross, he's doing exactly what I said at the beginning of the year he needed to do and that I thought he would do this year. It's not been spectacular, but it's been good. He's in the top 16 in averages in the Players' Championship events this year. He's getting results more often than not. Okay, he hasn't won a title, but he's putting in deep runs. He's picking up wins. He's getting confidence back, and it's showing. And that's what he needed to do. As you mentioned, the big thing will be at the World Match Play and at the European Championship, where he's defending from 2 years ago a title in both. But he's putting himself in the position that he'll be going there thinking that he can at least contend, and he doesn't have to win those titles. He's going to most likely drop down the rankings this year, but it's a season of avoiding most of that drop. He's still a top 16 player. He's playing like a top 16 player. He just needs to keep these weeks going and keep getting the results and defend some of that money, and he'll end the year as a top 16 player. And if he ends the year as a top 16 player after the year he had last year, he'll just start climbing next year, because he won almost nothing last year. So it's a real step in the right direction for Rob Cross, who's, starting to look like not the best player that he has been, but at least a player who is still there and can compete and win titles when it all clicks. For Steve Beaton, it's more steps in the right direction. Last year was a horror year for him, but it looks like he's going to make the World Championship again. He still has a chance to make the World Match Play. Yeah, he's going to need to pick out a title, but he did that 4 years ago. His last title saved his season, probably saved his career, and bought him another 4 years. Who's to say he's not going to do it in Coventry in a few weeks' time, get back to the World Match Play? But at the very least, he's put himself in position to make the Players' Championship Final, to make the World Championship, get himself into position for the Grand Prix as well, even if he doesn't make the match play. He's showing that he's still there or thereabouts. And, you go back 6 months ago, he wasn't.
And now we'll move on to our first guest on this week's show, and it is with the two-time Weekly Dartscast award winner, but more importantly, the reigning Grand Slam champion, Jose De Sousa.
I'm joined today by the Grand Slam of Darts champion, Jose De Sousa. Jose, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you.
This time last week, you were on your way to winning your second of back-to-back titles in the Super Series. How do you reflect on those 4 days in Milton Keynes last week?
Well, it's something crazy. I mean, I think it's because I play so much great darts in this last few months, I think. And my solid game makes me to win titles. That's what I think it's because of that. I don't know. I feel so great with this sensation. I can make big things and win some of the titles of PDC. It's so great for me. So I'm very happy to take these titles.
Yes, and your first title was September 2019, or shortly there before September 2019, and that's the last time we had you on. You won a second title a month later. What was it like your first season being able to win two titles in the PDC?
Well, my first title was with too much emotion. I cried at that moment because I just signed with my manager, Mark Elking. Since I signed with him, I know a couple of weeks later, I make my first title. It was so emotional because my first year in the PDC, it was so hard. I just think my first year in the PDC, well, I think to myself, well, just take experience. You know what is the darts. Before I play a lot of finals in soft tip, and I know what is the darts. But in this moment, it's something different because you now you play professional darts corporation. It's something different, very different. And since I win my first title, it was so special for me because give me think. Well, I make the same work and I have the same results like the big players. So I keep my work on every day, every time. Last year I play 95% of the days of the year, 6-8 hours a day to take my game on, and I do that with so much sacrifice. I've been so much time far away with my family, my wife, and I make that, and the results, it's 2 titles in my first year, and some semi-finals in the second year, Grand Prix in the second year, European Grand Prix in the second year, Grand Slam in the second year. Well, it was so great to see all that things. Now I'm a reference in the world of darts, and it means a lot for me.
So you mentioned the accomplishments you had last year, step by step. We'll start with the European Grand Prix in Sindelfingen, your first European Tour title. You beat Michael van Gerwen with 105 average in the final.
Yeah.
What did that mean to you?
Well, in that moment, I just think, well, you get the final, so let's play darts. I see maybe Michael have too much pressure when he play against me because he knows I'm a great player. I just think, well, let's go. Let's play darts and let's try to make my best. And I do it. Michael, he missed a couple of times, and I punish him with big scores and good finish. So it was I really think it was the best thing I can do in that game. Punish him and make my finishes well. And I beat him, I think, I don't remember well, 8-4 or 7-3, something like that. I don't remember well. But it was one of my big titles at that moment. And I feel so great that moment because I think, well, this is a kind of trophy for all the work I make all of the year. In that moment, my feelings was, wow, I beat the best player of the world, of the planet, of the earth. So, imagine what I feel in that moment. It was so great, so great.
Yes, indeed. And a couple weeks later, we saw you representing Portugal in the World Cup in Austria with alongside Jose Marquez. What was it like to represent your country in the World Cup?
Yeah, it's something special because after many times and speak and fight with the organization and the lucky to Singapore can come to play for the first time in all the years in the PDC. Portugal is the first time compete the World Cup, so it's a great feeling, a very emotional feeling. I do my best in the World Cup. Of course, we have to work much more if we want make more things, important things, or great things in the World Cup.
A few weeks after that, another debut for you in the Grand Slam, and you mentioned it earlier, you go all the way and you win the title. Can you describe what you were feeling when you hit the 158 to become the champion?
Well, the only thing I remember in the last three darts, it's the double 19s. And before I threw the darts, or in the same time I threw the darts, I start to crying because I know it's in. And well, it's amazing because they are so great players over there. I start to a difficult group with Michael Smith, Hataski, Lisa Ashton, and I don't remember the other guy, sorry. But it was difficult because I start to lose. Michael, he win his last game with 5-1, I think, and I will have to do it, win 2 legs or 3 legs to Lisa Ashton. Then I beat him. I beat Lisa 6-5 or 6-1. I don't remember. And I'm qualified to the next season. Then I take Cheesy, Michael Smith. I beat Michael Smith, and I never thought I can beat him in that moment. He plays so great darts, but it's the darts. It's what it is. Then I make a win with Simon Whitlock, and I see me in the final. So I mean, what can I do more? I can expect more than that. Final again, in a big tournament. Then comes James Wade. I beat James Wade in the final, and I think, what can I do more? So this is the best of my darts. Well, that feeling was so great. It was so great tournament. I like that tournament because it's similar to the soft tip when you play run Robbie against everybody in your group, and then you qualify to the next season, and it's great for me. For me, it was great. I really like it.
Now, mention as well, you've been with Phoenix Darts for a while, and last year you as well as Dimitri Vandenberg became brand ambassadors for Phoenix Darts.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Well, it means I think Phoenix, they are conscious of the players we are. They want to be a reference in the soft tip in the world, so they take the best players they can take. And I think it was that we make promotion all the time. It's a great firm of soft tip. They have I think one of the more important machines in soft tip, and that's great for us for Phoenix Darts. I think we are all happy with that contract with Phoenix.
Now let's talk about this year, your first year in the Premier League, and you made it all the way to the final. Of course, the last week you get to play in front of crowds. The crowds returned. What was it like having the fans back and celebrating when you check out a 120 tops?
Well, that was amazing. I mean, I never thought I can do that in front of the crowd. I think, well, like Aspinall, because it was against Aspinall, they understand the situation because I make that a couple times in the ProTour, in the floor. I just tried to make in front of the crowd because it was the first time in many months without crowd. We start to play again in front of the crowd. It's like welcome back to the crowd, and if I can make something special to the crowd, it means a lot for me. I feel so calm with the crowd, and that's what I think. When I see 120, I think to myself, just try, because if I make 20 simple, I have triple and double again. But if I make double, it's just throw the darts against the other and make three doubles, three tops. It was amazing. And I think the crowd like it.
Of course, now you're into the top 10 in the world. You've won a major, Premier League finalist, as we said. Going to be making your first appearance at the Winter Gardens in a few weeks. What are you most looking forward to, though, for the rest of the year?
Well, I hope I can make my work the best way I can. Give not surprises, but many happiness to the crowd, to my fans, family to follow me, every people involved. Especially, I want to make a big thanks to Mark Elking. He helped me. He helped me in everything I need. We are so happy with Mike Elkin. I don't speak only for me, but all for the team. We are so common with this man. He is so great manager. So the end of the year, I don't know what I can do in the World Match Play. It's in 4 weeks, I think, or the next Super Series 5. I try always to make my best darts, make to the people enjoy my darts. It's the best way I can play. Enjoy my darts, feeling my darts, make my job, and make sometimes crazy things that people see. How can they do that? and I don't know. It's this is funny. That's what I think. This is all funny. It's a lot of work behind, and I work every day to this. It's my life. I live darts, and I'm really happy to be in the place I am.
And lastly, After winning the Grand Slam, you got a message from Jose Mourinho, the other special one. And as we're talking now, a big game coming up for Portugal against France at the Euros. Will you be following, and do you think Portugal can retain the title?
Well, I don't know if Portugal can make the title again. Actually, I don't follow the football too much, but I wish the best to the team of Portugal. They have great players like the other teams. I wish all the best, and I wish the best for Jose Mourinho. He sent me emotion message, video message. I don't have the pleasure to meet him at now. I hope in the future I can meet him. I know he is in Italy, I think now. But yeah, that's what it is. About football, I wish all the best to the team of Portugal. And the show goes on.
The show goes on indeed, and thank you so much, Jose.
You're welcome. Thank you too.
Thanks again to Jose for joining us. Now to some sad news last week with the passing of the PDC Hall of Famer, the referee Bruce Spendley. How will Bruce be remembered in the world of darts?
Well, he was really the first, or one of the first, superstar referees in darts. Before there was Russ Bray, before there was Kirk Bevins, there was Bruce Spendley. And from the start of the PDC, and really the start of Phil Taylor's career, it was Bruce Spendley calling most of the big moments, as the greatest player who ever lived became the greatest player who ever lived. So he's intertwined with Phil Taylor's career more so than any, well, obviously than any referee, but probably more so than any one person, because he was there for many of his biggest moments over 20, 25 years. He also was just a fantastic referee. Went back and watched a video the day he died, which was showing how his 180 call evolved over time. And it evolved with the sport from just, 180 to, I can't do it. I'm bring someone on who can do impressions. But he evolved and helped create what the sport is most known for, at least by people who don't follow it, the 180 call. He and Russ Bray, of course, the two first real famous ones. That did help increase darts' popularity. That was one of the first things that struck me about the sport. And Bruce Spendley was still refereeing only just when I started watching darts a decade ago. It was the 180 call that was the most noticeable thing about the sport. And yeah, I mean, he's, from the beginning of the World Championships in the BDO through the split, through the PDC, he was there, and seeing darts emerge as one of the leading, from a pub sport to a leading television sport. Yeah, I don't, trying to see what more to add. There's not much more. It was a fantastic referee, an advert for the sport, and he will be missed.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. PDC website, when they put their article out about Bruce sadly passing away, and they had in the headline legendary referee, and I think they've got that spot on. For me, he is right up there as one of the best referees to ever do it, one of the best in darts. He refereed 34 consecutive World Championships, 1980 to 2013. The last one that he called, you mentioned Phil Taylor. It was Phil Taylor's last world title, the 16th that he won against Michael van Gogh in 2013. And not long after that, he was quite rightly inducted into the PDC Hall of Fame. And you've only got to look at the tributes that we've seen on social media everywhere else, from players, officials, fans of darts. Shows how much respect people had for him and how highly regarded he was in the world of darts. And like you, he was one of the referees that I first started watching, I guess, when I was watching the darts around 2004, 2005 time. He was an ever-present, and he was at all the big events. The 180 call you mentioned, I used to love his 180 call, his 140 call as well. And I was trying to think of some of the moments that he's been involved in that have stuck with me. And you've got the Colin Lloyd when he punched the board at Ali Pali is one that no one will forget. You mentioned one of the first World Championships you watched. That was the draft gate with James Wade and Adrian Lewis, he was on the stage for that one as well. Some 9 darters that he's called, the first one in the Premier League with Raymond van Barneveld when he came over from the BDO. Who can forget the one with Dean Winstanley at the World Championship when he ran off the stage basically after hitting that one. I think it was against Vincent van der Voort. But these are just great moments, and Bruce will be remembered for those moments. And you're always going to go on YouTube and watch classic games, and more often than not, when you look through that time span, 30, 35 years, you'll see Bruce Spendley up on that stage as well. And you're going to hear from Gary Wood a little bit later, who's a PDC stage official, and he'll speak a little bit more about Bruce because he's got some nice words to say about him as well. But yeah, like you, I think he will be always remembered in the world of darts as one of the best to ever do it.
Now, right around when we recorded a couple weeks ago, the PDC moved the 5th Super Series to Coventry and penciled in not 1, not 2, but 3 Euro Tour qualifiers for that week. Could we be seeing the return of the Euro Tour this summer?
I'm definitely hopeful about that. And I said at the start of the year, I didn't think we'd see it until the second half of the year. And I wanted that to be a tip that usually they all go wrong, but that one was sadly right. But I think we are starting to see Europe open up again. It's a little bit different indoors to outdoors, but we've got the Euros going on at the moment, and you're seeing some big crowds involved for that. We had 19,000 at Wembley at the start of this week, and this week was supposed to be party time in the UK with all the restrictions being lifted, but that has been pushed back 4 weeks to mid-July now. So hopefully we're getting towards the end of that. But as far as the rest of Europe, we've got Hungary with, I think it was something like 55,000 people there for their Euros games in the last couple of weeks. And it would be great to see a Euro Tour in Hungary. You guys will remember we had Inuku Hosani on in March. He's part of the Hungarian Darts Federation, and those guys missed out on having their first European tour last year because of the pandemic, and they seem to be one of the countries in Europe that is opening up a lot quicker. So maybe that could be a place to put it on. But yeah, I think we will start to see him. Going to have to be after the World Match Play now, isn't it? I think it's a bit short notice to get them in now, especially the qualifiers not until the 9th of July, and the World Match Play the 17th to the 25th of July. But August, aside from Challenge Tour and Development Tour, it's a blank canvas for the PDC, and I'm sure they're working on it at the moment to try and get the European Tour events. There's going to be a lot of hurdles to jump through. There's probably going to be countries where the social distancing may still be in place, so it might be difficult to head out there. They're probably looking, if they can, as a priority to get venues that are going to sell out completely, full crowds without the restrictions on numbers. So that's probably going to be at the top of their list. Is maybe Hungary could be the one, maybe Germany, maybe Denmark, maybe Holland. We don't know yet, but I think we're getting close to the return of the European Tour, and I think hopefully in the next few weeks we'll hear a bit more about that. But if I had to make a guess, I'm going to guess that we will be back in August.
Yes, and I agree, and I should add, I said not 1, not 2, but 3. I should have said, but up to 3. The PDC haven't officially said there will be 3, but they've left that open, which means there must be up to 3 events in the cards, and it's just getting, the logistics of it all worked out. And I think August makes the most sense because normally, if we were in normal times, it would be the World Series events in Australia and New Zealand, but those are obviously not going forward this year. They're tentatively scheduled for next year to have the return of the full Global World Series. Still going to be, I believe, the World Series event in Denmark later this year. But beyond that, the World Series has been pushed back another year. But that leaves the August calendar open. And to fit in a few World Series events and maybe, not World Series, sorry, Euro Tour events, and maybe a week or two worth of Super Series events makes sense because there's nothing else on the calendar for the month. It's still, though, up in there. And there has to be flexibility because we just don't know what's going to happen next. We still don't know, even though things are improving, whether they'll be good enough to be able to have a full crowd, whether the governments of certain countries will allow it or not. But once that guidance comes in, let me step back. Before that guidance comes in, you need to have an idea because people still need to plan. And these Euro Tour events do require a lot of planning. Flights still, especially international, can still be a bit difficult to nail down. So it does need to come together fairly soon, but it sounds like that'll be the case because the PDC wouldn't be making that type of announcement if they weren't pretty sure something was going to happen. We've, both Barry Hearn and Matt Porter, when we've had them on, have said similar. They're not going to announce something unlike some other people, until they know that it'll work out. They've left some flexibility by saying up to 3, but that probably means at least once for sure, if not 2, and they're hoping to get 3 on the calendar in August. And we'll just have to hang tight until we hear more.
Yeah, we look forward to that. Well, let's hear from our next guest. It is the Pro Tour #1, Joe Cullen. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the Pro Tour #1, Joe Cullen. Thanks for the time, Joe. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, Alex. Yeah, I'm glad to be back. I've enjoyed the time off, but it's been really nice to get back playing again.
Yeah, and we certainly saw that. It's been just over a week now since you doubled your tally of titles for the season, winning on the first day of the Super Series last week, leaving Milton Keynes. How did you reflect on your week overall?
Well, if you look at the results, I got progressively worse, I think. But yeah, my aim was to go there and win at least one title. But I'm as surprised as anyone knew it was the first day, with such a long layoff. But it's just how it works out. Sometimes it's, I had a tough draw. But it worked out, and I ended up winning, and obviously similar with Gezi as well. He did the same amount of time off as well, and we both made the final the first time of asking. So yeah, it was pleasing to get the win, but I think the consistency wasn't there for the rest of the week. I think by the last day, it was just a bit tiring, obviously with being off so long, and playing as much darts as they had done after such a long layoff. So I think I just got a bit tired in the end.
You mentioned the layoff. You were one of several players to skip the third Super Series over in Germany. Was it the travelling and the restrictions that put you off, or did you want to have a little break during the season?
No. My flight was booked to go, and the hotel was booked and everything. Because obviously with it being elite sport, we had an exemption form, for when we returned to the UK to not have to quarantine. And then I think it was about 6 days before I was supposed to fly. I don't know if it was Germany or the UK that introduced it, but there was a mandatory 10-day quarantine upon return. So I said to my manager, Jason, who said if there's any sort of quarantine, I won't be going. I've got sort of 2 young kids that I need to be getting out of the house to take to school, and my wife works sort of on the front line of the NHS. So it was the decision was made for me, but that was always going to be the case.
Well, let's take a little look further back. We last had you on the show just after your run to the quarterfinals of the World Match Play 2018. You spoke to my co-host Burton. Since then, you've become a winner on the Euro Tour, the first of those titles, the European Darts Match Play 2019. What are your memories of that weekend?
Yeah, probably as far as what a singular day goes, probably the best day sort of that I've had in darts, speaking of the PDC. But it was just one of those days. I remember it pretty well. I knew I was going to win. It was a really strange feeling. I spoke to some of the boys that was there at the time, and I knew I was going to win the event. Didn't matter who I played. It was just a strange feeling, and I've had it a few times since, and I've managed to win as well. So it's just, if you can bottle that feeling and just open the bottle every time you needed it, that'd be great.
Yeah, so a good feeling to have, and that second Euro Tour title followed towards the end of last year, again beating Michael van Gogh in the final to win the International Darts Open. What did that really mean to you?
Yeah, it was nice to back up sort of the previous year's win. Obviously, there only been 4 European tours last year due to the sort of COVID. It was nice. It was nice to win one, and there was fans there as well, which made it even more special.
And we have to talk about the World Championship last year, and firstly the game with your friend on tour, Johnny Clayton, the 2 tops in the decider. We spoke with Johnny recently about the game and the great sportsmanship that was on show between you two. How special was it to pull off a shot like that in the final leg?
Yeah, especially given the record I've got there. It was, and it all pretty much my own way in the first round against Wayne Jones. He didn't really turn up. And then after that, Johnny, he was similar to me. He was starting to play really well consistently. And obviously he's gone on to bigger and better things, as we've seen this year with the Premier League. But yeah, it was one of those. He was coming back at me, and I'd played him once on TV before, and it was just sort of a nice game, if you like. But I noticed that Johnny was, he was giving it loads during the game. It's nothing towards me, but probably just trying to get himself sort of up for the game. And I just thought, well, he's bang up for it as well. So that's why the reaction and the emotion poured out at the end for myself.
And then came that epic clash with MVG in the next round. You only threw 180s in that game. You lost out in a decider. And after you said you've never been as gutted to lose a game, you're sure you'll find some positives over the next week or two, but you felt a bit deflated when the dust did settle. How did you reflect on that month?
Yeah, plenty of positives to take from the game. Again, I spoke with my dad after the game and the management, and it was a case of sort of a stock's risen, you know what I mean? There was people talking about it that weren't even interested in darts, you know. You had Premier League footballers, celebrities all over the place, you know, so at least people sort of stood up and took notice of, you know, what I am capable of. But as far as the game goes, it was a tough one to take at the time, but, you know, I'm well over it now. I just thought maybe put too much pressure on myself the last leg. I thought that, you know, I'd been up there for I don't know how many hours, threw everything at him and he was still there, and I just said to myself, you know, don't blow it. Maybe I think that was, looking back now, I think that was the wrong thing to say. I should have just carried on the way I was playing. I know it's easier said than done, but I think by saying to yourself, don't blow it, you put a little bit of doubt in your mind. And obviously Michael, who was world number 1 at the time, he piled in with a 180, I think, second throw, so you're massively under it. But yeah, I can't be too harsh on myself. I missed a couple of darts to win, but there was at the Bull. I think anyone can miss a Bull. It's when you start missing 2 or 3 darts to win, you know, consecutively. That's when you need to get on your own back, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you mentioned the 2 darts at the Bull. You kindly sent us a video message accepting the Match of the Year award. Our listeners voted for it. That was their Match of the Year for last year. Did you watch any of the game back or any of the clips? Because John Part in commentary on them shots at the Bull, it was a great match to watch.
In fact, I think that's out of the whole match, I think that's the only one that I saw. I think there's a miss of 164, and John Part's, I think, testicles went into outer space. I think it was. I think that's the only actual thing I saw of the whole game. I've never been one for watching myself back, especially if I lose. I don't mind watching the odd one back if I win. So maybe it's time to, you know, put those big epic games, you know, like that one against Michael, the one in Blackpool against Gary. I'm involved in 2 amazing games, but I've been on the receiving end of both of them. So, you know, next time I'm involved in a game, I'm sure I'll be the victor that time.
Definitely, and we should mention as well that the shirt you wore on stage that night, you put up for auction and you raised a lot of money for charity. Talk to us about that. Yeah,
it was just a thing. I'm a big rugby league fan, Wigan Warriors fan, and obviously the thing with Rob Burrow, you know, it's terrible. He's got a young family and he's got a wife, and to be diagnosed with that at such a young age, you know, that knowing that there's nothing you can do, you're powerless. I just thought it'd be nice just to put something out there, you know, for them. And a lady from Holland, I forget her name, she bought it. She paid 1,400 for it, so it was a great amount, you know, for the shirts. And obviously all that money was donated straight to, you know, the Rob Burrow Foundation. So yeah, it was a small token compared to the amount of money they've raised, but it was nice to, you know, sort of do my bit for it.
Yeah, it's a lovely gesture. And speaking of charity, we recently saw you appear on a celebrity edition of Bullseye, partnering up with David Seaman and going all the way to win. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was a strange one. I literally got the phone call, I think it was about a week and a half before actually going on the show. We filmed it at the start of April, and I originally thought that it was going to be, you know, the familiar format, you know, where the pro goes on, throws 9 darts for charity. And then Jason said to me, oh, actually it's you, Wayne Mardle and Fallon. So yeah, it was nice to get paired up with David Seaman. He was a really nice fella. He could play darts as well, but I think the biggest surprise was Angela Griffin. She was showing me a setup she has at home. She has genuinely has a better setup than me. She has all, no, genuinely as well. She was showing me she has all the tripod up, and her and her husband play every Friday night in some online darts league. I thought she was winding me up when she was telling me, and then she was showing me all the pictures and stuff, and it was great. But so in regards to the show, it was really good fun. It was all light-hearted humour, and I think they cut most of the best bits out. Alan Carr gave David Seaman a few things about what his nickname should be, obviously with his last name, but there was cut out the shows. But it was all good fun on the day, and obviously to win it with the golden dart at the end, you probably couldn't have scripted it any better.
Yeah, it's a good ending. And speaking of setups, we've seen a big change for you in the last 12 months. You've gone from Unicorn, you parted ways with them for a long time, moved over to Windmill. How's that switch been so far? It seems like it's worked out quite well so far.
Yeah, that's how it seems. Like I say, the decision to leave Unicorn, it was, I wouldn't say it was an easy one, but it just felt like it needed to come. You know, we're left on really good terms with Edward and Matt there. You know, they wish me well leaving, but I just felt I'd been with them a long time, and I think me personally, nothing to do with them. I think my sort of darts have gone a little bit stale and a little bit, stale is the word. So obviously Winmore, spoke to Jason, my manager at Modus, and just said, look, Winmore would be my preference. Obviously I heard great things about what Lee's done for players down there, Peter Wright, obviously Michael, Gezi as well. I've heard nothing but good things about him, and I went down on the day and we got my darts sorted within the day, and obviously the sales of them, I think they're the best selling dart of the last, since it came out. I don't think there's any darts that sold better than them, so it just goes to show, that Lee's eye for, making a desirable barrel, not just for me but for the public as well. It's great, and obviously you can see that the barrels work as well. I think I've got three titles using them, so I don't think it's bad in the first 6 months.
Certainly done well, and we've seen you throw some big averages this year as well. 111 against Max Hopp, a 105 against Ian White on the way to that title last week, but also picking up wins when you're not at your best. You had a 93 average against James Wade, MVG and Gerwin Price to win the title last week. Is that something you've noticed, the ability to dig in and get results when you're not firing?
Yeah, definitely. Just I think the bigger shots in games, and when I say bigger shots, I mean it could be for a 12 dart, it could be for a 21 dart. The bigger shots seem to hit more often than I miss. And I've noticed as well, obviously, because I'm playing, really, really well at the minute, and being the number one, I've been, I think, vulnerable a few times in games, but it just seems like the player who I've been playing has sort of buckled a little bit. I can relate to it, when I first came on the scene in your drawing, sort of Phil Taylor, Van Gerwen first games, and he sort of played a player, not just the game, and I think I've definitely seen a difference in the way people approach playing me, I think.
Well, let's look ahead then. We've got another Super Series coming up in a few weeks before the World Match Play. What's the plan for you now? I think it's less than 4 weeks before Blackpool. What's the plan to get yourself ready? Just carry on doing the same as what I'm doing. I think the 3-month layoff that we just had, I didn't really practice at all. I think I picked them up about probably a week and a half before we in Milton Keynes, but it's different now. Obviously, I'm practicing sort of as we speak, and I'll be putting the hours in, right up until Blackpool. Hopefully, can pick up another title or two in Coventry in 2 weeks' time. Just keep that winning feeling going into probably the second biggest major of the year. And ranking-wise, you're up to number 15 now. You've been around that top 16 for a few years. What's the next goal for you? Are you looking towards the top 10, top 8, and firmly establishing yourself at the top?
Yeah, well, I've never really looked at rankings in the sense that I need to be here, I need to be there. If you're performing well on a consistent basis and on TV, the rankings will take care of themselves. I've seen some of the projected rankings for the World Championships, and I'm around number 11 and 12, so I can have a couple of solid runs on TV, maybe even pinch a title on TV. I think I'll rocket straight into the top 10, and like I say, they'll take care of themselves, the rankings. Definitely,
yeah, and you've seen Johnny Clayton win the Premier League after breaking through on TV, winning the Masters, the World Cup. I know the Premier League is a big goal for you in your career to get in there. Do you think these next 6 months could be where we see you follow Johnny, have some big runs on TV and put yourself in contention?
Yeah, I hope so, yeah. It's I've had a good start to the year, solid start. I think if you was picking the Premier League now, I'd probably get in, but I've been in this position before, and I don't actually mind saying that I've obsessed about it, and a couple of times I've maybe been close and obsessed about it, and it's been to my demise. So I've spoken to Johnny about it. I've no doubt that I will get in the Premier League. If it's next year, great. If it's the year after, so be it. I will get in it at some stage, so it'll happen when it happens. I think I'm matured a bit in that sense that there's no point obsessing over it. It's just down to me. If I perform, I'm in. If I don't, I'm not.
Good mindset to have. And lastly, we know you're a keen football fan. England already through to the knockout stage. How far do you think we're going to go in the Euros?
I'm going to disappoint you now because I'm not patriotic whatsoever. I spoke to the guys at the darts and stuff and said, "Oh, what we're going to do?" And I'm like, "Listen, I don't care if they get beat in the group stage or they get beat in the final. You know, if they win it, great. But I'm not one of those who's going to jump on the bandwagon if they do win it and say, "Oh, I'm an England fan. I'm a Man United fan," and that's it for me.
Fair enough. Well, best of luck to them for next season. Well done on the starts of the year that you've had, and we wish you all the best for the next Super Series, the World Match Play, and what comes for the rest of the year.
Yeah, nice one. Thanks for speaking to me.
Thanks again to Joe for joining us, and a word on our sponsor, Low Six, who present this show. We'll have some contests with them coming up in the next Super Series. But on our last show, we made the brave picks for the Euros, which is going on at the moment. I went with Portugal. You went with Germany. Our two teams went up against each other, and Germany coming out on top 4-2 at the weekend. But as we talk right now, the group stage coming to an end. Are you going to stick with your Germany prediction, or are you going to change to someone else?
I'm going to stick with it. Don't have a reason to change yet, though by the time you're listening to this episode, I might be made to look a fool. But for now, I'm going to stick with it. We can always re-record this segment if Germany somehow lose to Hungary and get knocked out.
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar predicament with Portugal. They need to, they might not need to get a result against France when we're recording tonight. But if I do have to switch, I've got a team in place, but I won't jinx them just yet. I might start going with the teams that England play because it looks like my predictions aren't very good for the football as well. If you guys want to get involved in the contests with Low Six, download the PDC Picks app, 18 plus, UK residents only, T&Cs apply. Please gamble responsibly, begambleaware.org, and they should have some contests on the Super Series coming up in a few weeks' time. We'll be back with some listener questions in a moment, but first let's get to our final guest on this week's show, and it is with the PDC stage official, Gary Wood. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the PDC stage official, Gary Wood. Thanks for the time, Gary. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Alex, thank you, and it's a pleasure to speak with you tonight.
Good man. Well, let's start off at the beginning for you in darts. Were you hooked from an early age? How did you get introduced to the sport?
I think it was my parents when I was around 13 or 14. We used to go on holiday and things, and to keep us quiet, they bought us like one of those paper dartboards with the little plastic darts, hung it on a fence, and I thought, I quite like this, and then I progressed from there through the youth clubs. I won a few youth tournaments back in the day, and then I got the real bug around the age of 16, 17. And by 18 I was playing in all the local leagues around where I live in North Shields, which is 9 miles from Newcastle. And then I went from local leagues into Super League, and then I represented the county. And representing the county, I actually played with the late, great Jockey Wilson when he played for Northumberland. So yeah, I had quite a good career myself with the darts. And then of course I met Tommy Cox, who was also playing in the local leagues around the North Shields and Whitley Bay area. And I met Tommy at a young age. I was only 17 when I first met Tommy, and then not thinking that years later I would be working for him within the PDC.
Just circling back to what you said there about playing with Jockey Wilson, what was that experience like?
It was fantastic. At the time, Jockey Wilson obviously played in the Northumberland A team. I played in the County B team at that time, but obviously we travelled together wherever we were playing, Merseyside, all over the country really. So I got to know Jockey very well through that, and then I ended up playing him in a few exhibition games around the northeast. And we stayed friends throughout really until he went back up to Kilcoddy, where he was from. He lived in Wallsend actually for a good few years. That's why he was playing Northumberland County. And it was an experience because Jockey was such a character. You know, off the hockey, as much on the hockey as off the hockey, and vice versa. You always had a good laugh with Jockey, and what a fantastic dart player he was.
So yourself, you played to a very good standard, and I was reading up as well, you had an accident while you were at work. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, unfortunately that was really the end of playing at a decent level. of darts. I was at work in Newcastle city centre as a painter and decorator. I've had my own business painting and decorating since 1986. And the accident actually occurred on October the 26th, 1989. I fell 43 foot from a roof whilst painting a window. The actual catch on the inside of the window snapped off. I lost hold of the window and I went straight off the top. I actually died twice in the ambulance on the way to hospital. And the good thing, if there's a good thing, Alex, the saving thing rather, was that the RVI hospital in Newcastle was only about 3 or 4 minutes from where I actually had the accident. Any further out and they said I would have definitely died. They got us into hospital. The injuries were never going to actually kill us. What was stopping me heart was I was in such severe shock. Once they stabilised the heart rhythm, like I say, the injuries could be repaired, but they were quite bad injuries, full dislocation and fracture of the shoulder, which was my right shoulder, I was right-handed, so I'd pretty much seen the end of the darts. I spent 3.5 months in hospital and then a further year going every other day to hospital for physiotherapies and things, basically learning to walk again, really. So that was the dark days. Like I say, in 1989, I did get back to a relatively good level of fitness, and I tried the darts again. I knew straight away the throw would never be the same, and what finished this was, no disrespect to any dart player, but I ended up getting beat off players that really, I know I should never have got beat off. So that was that. But then along came the offer to join the PDC.
Yeah, you've managed to still play your part in the world of darts, and I was reading as well, you said you spent 3 months in the hospital after that accident and that gave you a new outlook on life. So how much did your life change after that experience?
Oh, well, I mean, I think everybody, growing up through the decades, you tend to take life for granted, and certainly something like what happened to me, Alex, proved that life can be very short. And of course it did change my outlook on life. Things that I used to worry about and that I stopped worrying about, and I just take every day as a blessing, really. I mean, I suffer badly now. I have a bit of arthritis here and there, and but there's people far worse off than me. But yeah, it did. It changed a lot of things, and I never ever thought that I would ever be back in darts until, of course, I got the calling from the PDC.
Yeah, that's what I was going to come on to. You had that call come from Tommy Cox, the late Tommy Cox. What was your initial reaction when Tommy asked you to join? Was it a yes straight away?
Well, what it was, Alex, I was actually playing a game of darts in the local pub that I played for, the Piper, in Colour Courts. And on the opposing team was another PDC official, Keith Bisbee. Now, Keith, as many people know, has been there since day one from when the breakaway happened from the BDO to the WDC and onto the PDC. And it was Keith who approached us that night, and he was sort of saying, there's a big expansion within the PDC now, and Tommy was looking for officials, preferably, who knew the game and knew some of the players. So I went along. I had a meeting first with Graham Fairhurst at the World of Darts offices. And then, of course, like I said, I met Tommy at a very young age, so he's been a good friend throughout the years. And then I went and seen Tommy. We sat down, had a chat, and he sort of put it to us that, we were going to be visiting different parts of the world. And, of course, he was right, because the first place I ever went with the darts, with the PDC, was from the 2003 World Championships to the 2004 Global Cup in Shantou City in China. So it was something that I thought, I'm going to be back involved. And funny enough, when I did the first few tournaments for the PDC, it was just like incredible to think that I'd went from playing darts to standing 3 foot watching the best dart players on the planet. So it gave us a new lease of life, so to speak, Alex.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, many of our listeners, they'll recognise your face from being a marker on TV. What other roles have you had or do you currently have with the PDC over the years?
I mean, people, the people that I don't know, the people that do see us on the TV marking, they don't realise that there's a lot more goes into the role of an official. We do all the floor tournaments, so I do all the challenge tour events, the development tour, and of course the Players' Championship events. Prior to doing the PDC work, I worked with Tommy on his own World of Darts events up and down the country for many years as well. So I've had a role in a lot of different things. I've ran tournaments myself within the PDC when we used to do the regional playoffs for the UK Open qualifiers before Riley's took over that role. So I would find myself up in Scotland. I did the 3 Scottish playoffs, I did the Newcastle playoff, the Sunderland playoff, the Middlesbrough playoff, the Nottingham playoff. So I did quite a few things, actually turning up, running the event, creating the draw, and getting these players through to the televised finals of the UK Open.
We've spoken to some of the referees on the show before about what that feeling's like, being on the stage with that big crowd behind you. What's it like as a marker, and what would you say is the best atmosphere that you've experienced?
Oh, well, I mean, in the 20 years of doing it, the crowds have just grown massively. I mean, in the early days of Vegas, I remember when me and Keith or me and Graham would finish our marking duties for a game, we were actually asked to go and sit in the crowd to make it look like there was more people in there, And of course, from the Circus Tavern days, when you were getting I don't know what the Circus Tavern holds, maybe 1,800 people. Now you're getting 4,500 in Ali Pali. And of course the Premier League speak for themselves. I did the Dutch Premier Leagues, which was just unbelievable, a sea of orange. You stood on that stage and looked out, and it was just, it made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Blackpool, it's very intense. Blackpool, it's it's not a massive stage, and it's very close to the crowd, so you get a real buzz from the atmosphere the crowd creates there. Ali Pali's a bit different because I've always said I feel Ali Pali, maybe 20% of them are pure darts fans, and 80% just want to be there singing in their fancy dress at Christmas, of course. And it's really, really hard to concentrate at Ali Pali because of the noise. It's constant, the singing, the chanting. Not one of my favourite, the World Championships. People wouldn't believe that, but it isn't. But I do love Dublin. We do the World Grand Prix in Dublin. I do like the Grand Slam because of the way the format is, and of course it involves the BDO players with the PDC players. So yeah, and the UK Open, I used to love the UK Open when it was at Bolton and you had all the stages in the same room, because that created, fantastic atmosphere, like when a 9-darter's being hit on stage 2 and not the main stage, and that it was really good, really, really good.
Some great moments, and maybe one moment that you want to forget is one that's come in from Dave Allen, one of your colleagues at the PDC. I was speaking to him earlier. He said Gary's a great fella and one of the most professional guys you'll ever meet. You should ask him about swallowing the fly in China in 2004. He's so good he swallowed it rather than cough and disrupt the match.
Oh dear, I thought that might come up. Yeah, Dave's a really good lad, a good friend. Yeah, in 2004 we were, I think it was it was certainly Wayne Mardle. I think he was playing John Lowe, I'm not sure. But what happens is the actual stage, the dartboard had a big golden dragon around it. So when the players were hitting the dartboard, these flies were flying out of the dragon and flying straight back in because of the TV lights. And of course, one sort of veered to my side and went straight in my mouth. And both players were on a double at the time, and I thought, oh my God, I could feel it buzzing around in the back of my throat. So I thought, rather than put the players off by coughing it out or anything, I'll just swallow it, which I did. And Wayne Mardle, he came over to us at the end of the game and he said, God, Gaz, are you okay? He says, you were making a funny noise. Of course, I told him, and Wayne tells that story all the time. Don't know why he swallowed a fly.
Before the pandemic arrived last year, the PDC, it was riding a crest of a wave. You mentioned there about the big crowds and exploring new countries, but to keep the tour running, it's been a tremendous achievement over the last 12 months. What's it been like being a part of that team?
Oh, absolutely fantastic. I mean, there's been a heck of a lot of work behind the scenes. Our chief executive, Matt Porter, constantly on the phone, constantly keeping in touch with the government for the changes, and, things look to be going well, and then another step backwards instead of forwards, and just the general getting everything to come together, the testing, everything. It's been a marvellous achievement by everybody, the press guys, the stage crew, everybody, the people who set the events up. One massive big effort, and it's one of the only sports that's really kept going, without a change in prize funds, especially. They've still paid out exactly the same money without getting any money back, really. So it's been a fantastic achievement.
Definitely has. And one of the big changes in recent years has been the introduction of Dart Connect on the floor events, but also because of the restrictions in more recent times, players having to mark their own games as well. How have the players found that?
To be honest, the players have been fantastic in every aspect. Before we start play on a Players' Championship event, Keith Bisbee, who's the ProTour manager, he'll go through the rules with the players and explain that it is now a self-marked tournament. So, Alex, the hardest thing to do to a player is when they've been beat, is to go straight to them and say, I'm sorry, you've got a mark. So we reiterate that rule at the start of play, please stay at the board, mark the next game, and then you can go off and do whatever you want. And the players have 100% backed in every shape and form. And to be honest, they're very good with Dart Connect. It's such an easy thing to use as well. They do miss the marking scheme, guys, obviously, and hopefully we're due to have them back in July. But obviously now it's going to be a bit later. Maybe the players, the challenge tour in August. But the professional players have been absolutely brilliant.
That's good to hear. And as we were speaking before we started this, one of the reasons that we wanted to get you on the show was to talk about Bruce Spendley, the legendary referee who sadly passed away last week. Firstly, what are your earliest memories of meeting Bruce and working with him?
Oh, Bruce, yeah. I met Bruce long before I worked with him in the PDC, because like I say, in the early days when I was playing darts, every now and again an exhibition against one of the professional players at that time would pop up, and I'd go along, and Tommy would invite us to a lot of these exhibitions, and I first met Bruce doing exhibitions, and I remember, we did one in Whitley Bay next to the ice rink in Whitley Bay, and I played Bob Anderson, and it was the first time I'd met Bruce, and of course I managed to beat Bob that night with a 2-dart 94 checkout. I still remember it, and it was great to hear the referee that I'd only ever seen on TV calling like the 94 game shot type of thing, and from then on me and Bruce became friends. And before I joined the PDC, I worked with Bruce on Tommy Cox's World of Darts events up and down the country. So it was an easy fit, really, when I did join the PDC, that Bruce was there and we were really good friends. And, of course, we went to South Africa together with the PDC, Vegas a few times. And I got to know Bruce really well, away from the darts as well, as a friend, Many a time on the way to these events, we would pick Bruce up on the way down. I live in North Shields. It's about 35 miles to where he lives in Billingham, and would pop in, have a cup of tea, see his wife Ron, but he was just a lovely, lovely man, Alex.
Yeah, it definitely was. And after his last World Final in 2013, he was inducted into the PDC Hall of Fame. He did 34 World Championships in total, and still to this day a record 15 finals in the PDC World Championship. We've seen a lot of tributes come in from players, officials, fans. Does that just show how highly thought of Bruce was in darts?
Oh, without a doubt, Alex. I've never ever heard anyone have a bad word to say about Bruce. His professionalism, the way he conducted himself on the hockey, off the hockey, away from darts, such a polite man, always thought before he spoke, loved and cared deeply for his family, because me and Bruce had many a chat, and you could see the love he had for his family, and to work with, it was the clarity of the voice. I mean, not once in all the years I worked with Bruce did I ever look at him to question, was that what you'd said, Bruce, or anything, you know. He's just so professional. He flowed through the games. He made it so easy, which made my job easy.
I'm sure there'll be some of our listeners who may aspire to one day be an official, be that as a marker like yourself or as a referee like Bruce was. From your own experience, what advice would you give to them?
Well, the thing now is there's that many want to do the job, Alex, and that was the idea of it started out as volunteer markers, but now they are paid a small fee for their services, so it's like the volunteer marking scheme now, and people have aspirations that they would like to go on to the TV stuff now. I've been mentoring a young lad who's now doing a bit with the PDC called Owen Binks. And I took Owen under my wing a couple of years ago because I was starting to wind down a little bit of the TV work and concentrate more on the floor work, because I just thought, you know, after 20 years, I've probably done most of my time now, and it's time to enjoy a little bit more time at home with my family. So I brought Owen Binks, who started out in the volunteer scheme, and I've been learning him how to conduct himself and what he should do, what he shouldn't do. And to be honest, he's a very, very good official, or he will become a very, very good official. He's done a little bit TV work. He's done a Premier League. He's done the UK Open. You know, so he's building up now. So maybe in a couple of years' time, when I'm done with the TV, he'll just slip into my shoes.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Owen. We had him on the show last year, and finishing up with the football, he's a fellow Colchester fan like I am, but we know that you're a Newcastle fan. When we spoke to another of your PDC colleagues, Graham Fairhurst, on this show, he's joked, what will last longer, COVID-19 or the takeover of Newcastle United? What are your thoughts on that? How do you rate your chances going into next season? It looks like Steve Bruce is still going to be in charge.
It does, and to be fair, you know, Alex, I mean, it's like a poisoned chalice, the Newcastle job. Under the ownership of Mike Ashley, it's been very, very strenuous for whoever's took the managerial seat. You know, he's made it, to be fair, the last 3 years, he's made it clear that he wants to sell the club. He doesn't want to invest any more of what he calls his money. I don't understand how it's his money when it's the club's money. But he wants rid of the club, and hopefully this takeover will go through. But getting back to Steve Bruce, Alex, when you look at where we finished this year and you look at the statistics of it, he had exactly the same points as Rafa Benitez did during Rafa's time there. So you can look at it two ways. People straight away will say, yeah, but Rafa didn't have Callum Wilson. Rafa didn't have Maximin in midfield, you know, but you've still got to get them players to play for you. And Steve Bruce did towards the back end of the season.
Well, fingers crossed it will be a good season for Newcastle when it comes round. Gary, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you, talk about your career so far in the game, and we wish you all the best for the rest of the year.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Alex, and thank you very much.
Thanks again to Gary for joining us, and we'll finish up with some listener questions. The first one comes from George Dobson, who says, do you think Jose De Sousa will be a world champion? If so, how many will he win?
The second part of that is, well, assuming the answer is yes, the second part's more difficult because it really is impossible to say how many titles someone's going to win. I mean, Michael Van Gerwen might never win the world title again, or he might win another 5. It's just, that is more guesswork. Is Jose De Sousa good enough to win a world championship? Yes. Will he? I do think so. I think he is the most talented player in the world, and we are now seeing him get towards his best. But he still has a long way to go to reach his best. He really has almost no limit into what he can do. Really rivaled in the last decade only by Michael Van Gerwen 5 years ago in terms of genuinely thinking there's not a thing on the dartboard this guy can't do. I think he'll win a world title. I think there's every chance that world title will come this year. So I'm going to say yes, but I don't know how many he's going to win. I think that's just impossible to say. It might, he might win one this year and that'll be it. He might go on a streak and win 3 of the next 4. It's impossible to say, but yeah, I do think he will win one. He's too good not to.
Yeah, it's a tricky one to answer, and I'm assuming that George means the PDC World Championship, because we have got a lot more World Championships in darts now. I'm assuming he's not talking about the Mad World Championship, the WDF World Championship. The seniors, Jose, 47 years old. He could pack in the PDC in 3 years and go in the seniors event and play in that. And I think he would, with what he's played in recent times, wipe the floor with that field and become a world champion. But if we're talking about the PDC, yeah, I'm with you. It's so hard to call, but what we've seen from Jose in over the last 12 months, we spoke about it recently, the ceiling for players is a lot higher, but the World Championship, that is the pinnacle in darts, and you've got to get it right for those 2 or 3 weeks at Ali Pali. We're assuming that the crowds will be back for that by the time we get to end of December, start of January. But that is the one that everyone wants to get on their CV. For me, I'm not going to commit to it just yet, but I think he's got a fantastic chance if he carries on the way he's going, and he's going to be around for another few years at least anyway. So yeah, next 5 years, if he carries on playing the way he is, I think there's a very good chance that we'll see him lift the Silverdale Trophy.
Now, as things stand, Jermaine Waddamena is in the second to last world match play spot, and this question comes from John Thompson. Given some mediocre form as of late, do you think Jermaine Waddamena will hold on to that match play spot?
Again, it's another tough one, isn't it? Because he's up against it now. We've got to say, though, fair play to Jermaine, like a few of the players on tour. We saw him on the stream last week. He's lost a lot of weight, and fair play to him for doing that, because it's not an easy thing to do, and especially in darts as well, it's not an easy thing to do and then carry on playing to the level that you were at before. And I was looking at the 32 players that are currently set to qualify for the World Match Play, looking at the averages based on just the Players' Championship events. He's 30th on that list of the 32. Underneath him, Devon Peterson and Glenn Durrant. So he's not playing at a great level at the moment. He's only clear, I think, by £2,000 with 4 events to go. And just based off his 33 games that we've had in the floor events this year, 12 of them, so a third, he's averaged below 90, and then 11 of them 90 to 94. And we're talking about a player that only last year in the Players' Championship events, he averaged 112 in the semi-final and got to a final. He's more than capable of that. It's all going to come down to those final 4 days, and he's going to have to get the form right for that. So he's got a couple of weeks to get ready. He's got a bit of a gap, as I say. He's not got players that are one win behind him, so he's got a little bit of leeway going into these 4 days. It's a tough one. I'll wait and see on that one. I'm not going to commit either way, but he's got to turn up, and I think he's going to have to get to a couple of last 16s at least, because there are players that are sniffing behind him now.
Yeah, I think he's going to need probably another 2,000 pounds at least, maybe 2,500, to make sure he gets to the World Match Play. And if you look at this past weekend, he only won 1,000 pounds. He only won 2 matches across the 4 days, and didn't play all that well in winning those matches either, winning with just under an 86 and just under an 87 average. And that's not going to cut it more often than not. But you go back to the previous set of Super Series, he won his board twice, making the last 16 twice, and that should be enough to get him there. He has been struggling a bit this year, but it was nothing like what we saw in Super Series 4. That was a real dip from him. We'll see if it's just a one-off. It was the first competitive match in a couple months, because there was nothing in May. There wasn't anything at the back end of April. So it had been a while since there hadn't been anything, I should say, since the back end of April. So it had been a while since he had competed competitively. This next one will come up a little bit quicker. There's no reason to think he won't be playing, at the very least, back toward the standard he was playing at the beginning of the year. And if he's playing at or near that standard, you'd expect him to get the 4, maybe 5 wins he needs to get to the World Match Play. But he needs to get to that level, because if he's playing like he did this past weekend, it's probably not going to be enough. I think he'll hold on to his spot, but not if he plays like he did. Anything else for this week?
As always, we've got to say a big thank you to our guests for joining us. Big thank you to you guys for listening. Big thank you to our sponsor, Low 6, for their continued support. If you missed last week, we put out our first Darts Legends episode of the year with Peter Everson. Go and give that one a listen. We're going to have a new one coming up soon with Peter Manley as well. That episode's coming up soon. Our Dartscast trivia, the last one that we had, we said how many of the countries represented in Euro 2020 have won a match in the PDC World Cup. Congratulations to Dan Hutchinson, who was the first to get that right with 17. And here is this week's Dartscast trivia, courtesy of The Dying Nerd.
Well, it's trivia time now on the weekly Dartscast. Joe Cullen and Jose De Sousa both won titles at the Super Series in Milton Keynes last week. But what we want to know is which player did they beat in the final to win their first ever PDC senior title?
Thank you to Matt, as always, for that question. We'll be back. I don't know if it'll be next week. Maybe it'll be next week. Maybe it'll be the following week to look ahead to the next set of Super Series events, to look ahead, of course, to the last week, I should say, of events before the cutoff of the World Match Play. So a lot to play for, a lot to discuss. As things stand, a lot of debutantes in line for the World Match Play. So maybe we'll try to get some of those players on. Anyone else you want us to get on, please let us know. But thanks to all of our guests this week, as well as, of course, our sponsors, and even more, of course, to you for listening. We do it for you. We couldn't do it without you. We could do it without you, but it would be a lot less fun. So, well, and just hang tight for the next episode.